Exhausted but thrilled and determined, thousands of migrants are welcomed in Austria and Germany. Also ahead, why the US is worried about reports that Russia is building up a greater military presence in Syria. And a Twitter photo may offer new clues about the whereabouts of fugitive drug lord El Chapo Guzman. Hello and welcome to our viewers in the US and around the world. I'm Lynda Kinkade and this is CNN Newsroom. We begin with the expanding migrant crisis in Europe. Austria's Interior Minister says more than 8,000 refugees and migrants have crossed into the country from Hungary since late Friday. We're going to show you some pictures of people boarding buses after walking some distance from Budapest. This was the scene a few hours ago as migrants who'd made it to Austria continued their journey into Germany. They were greeted with cheers at this Munich railway station. Saturday, of course, marked the end of an exhausting week for many migrants who had walked hours in Hungary before being picked up by those buses which were dispatched from Budapest. Senior international correspondent Frederick Pleitgen joins me now from Vienna, where more migrants are getting on trains heading towards Germany. What's the scene like there now, Fred? How many migrants are we talking?
Well, we're talking about 1,000 here right now at the Vienna train station. We have to keep in mind that it is still very early hours here, and there is, in fact, a train, as you said, that's bound for Munich that's going to depart here very soon. These are all special trains that the Austrian railway company has put into place, and they're obviously free of charge for the refugees who want to go to Munich. Now, Vienna is, of course, a key point on their journey because they start on the trains in that little town of Nickelsdorf, where we spent most of yesterday. And I have to say that it was really an outpouring of support that came there from the people in Nickelsdorf. Let's have a look.
It was Saturday in the early morning hours when the standoff between the refugees and the Hungarian government ended. Budapest provided dozens of buses to take thousands of asylum seekers to Austria. Once they crossed the border, their fatigue and frustration turned to elation. Some, like this man who lost a leg in Syria's civil war, finding strength for the final walk into Austrian territory. I left about a month ago, he says. The journey across the sea was very hard, and so was the border with Macedonia. Everything was hard. Nothing was easy.
I know I'm very happy. All people very happy in Austria. Thank you, Austria. Thank you, Germany.
As more and more buses arrived, the lines of people kept moving west towards the Austrian border guards.
Even though these people are obviously absolutely exhausted, many of them have been on the road for months, have endured horrible things while they were trying to make their way over here. You can still see smiles on almost everybody's faces simply because they're so happy to finally have made it to Austria.
The small town of Nickelsdorf launched a massive aid drive on very short notice. Clothes, food, drinks, supplies kept arriving throughout the day, making sure the busloads of refugees received a warm welcome. I had to wake my colleagues up this morning and get them out of bed, the police officer in charge says. I think in light of the circumstances, we've done quite well. Austria says it received thousands of asylum seekers this day, and the people in Nickelsdorf made sure they were taken care of. Austria's rail company launched a special train service that will bring many of the refugees to other places in Austria or to Germany and a chance to begin a new life.
And Linda, as you can see, there were really some very emotional scenes that played out there throughout the course of that day. And I think one of the things to us as we were reporting that story that really stood out is that, you know, all that aid that was provided to those people is very important. But I think the most important thing to them was just being received there with a smile and having the local population mingle and introduce their families to those refugees. It really showed them that they were being welcomed there in that town. And one of the other things that the information that we just got as that report was running was that the Austrian government now says that 11,000 refugees have entered into Austria from Hungary over the past 24 hours, Linda.
Such wonderful scenes there of elated migrants and refugees, such a strong contrast to the treatment they had in Budapest. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, of course, has come out quite the hero in all of this and says Germany can cope with the influx of newcomers without raising taxes or jeopardizing its budget. Can you explain how Germany and Austria is going to efficiently process the thousands of migrants that are now arriving there?
Well, that's a very good question, because there is actually a process in place. I spoke to the local authorities there at the border yesterday, and I asked them, when these people come across the border, do you take down their names? Do you put them in some sort of system? They said they absolutely don't, because under European laws, if they did that, they would have to make them stay in Austria. So what they do is they take the people to that Nickelsdorf train station. They then tell them, you can get on a train, you can go to Vienna, and from there you can decide whether you want to apply for asylum in Austria or whether you want to go on to Germany. What happens then is that those who want to go to Germany, they take a train to the Munich main railway station. There, they are received by police officers. Then they are taken to temporary shelters where the processing begins. They usually spend a night in that temporary shelter and then are then taken to other shelters in the southeast Germany region, but also in other regions in Germany as well. So it's a little bit bureaucratic, but it is a process that is working. I was speaking to the agency in Germany, which is called the Federal Agency for Migration and Refugees, and they say they do have a pretty big backlog at this point in time, but they also think that they are going to be able to come to terms with this as well, Linda.
And Fred, as this all happens, Hungary is trying to crack down on migrant arrivals and has been trying to introduce new laws into Parliament to do just that. What does it mean for migrants that are trying to get towards Hungary and then on to Austria and Germany, the new arrivals that are yet to come?
Well, that's a very good question. I think as these new laws are introduced, and also especially as that fence that Hungary is building continues to be fortified, it's going to be interesting to see whether or not those people are actually going to still be able to make it into that country. It seems as though at this point in time, Hungary has not been able to stem the flow of refugees that are coming across its borders. And, to be fair, the Hungarians have been receiving a lot of flack for their treatment of these people over the past couple of days. They do have a major influx. The Hungarian government is saying it's about 3,000 people a day that are coming across its borders. And Hungary really isn't a very wealthy country, so it is something that does strain the country as well. That notwithstanding, many of the migrants did say that things could have been better for them as they went through Hungary. It's going to be, however, interesting to see whether or not the Hungarians are going to be able to stop the flow, but it looks as though at this point in time there are simply so many people coming that it's pretty much impossible to stem that. And doing that, obviously, also very much makes things difficult for these people who have had such a hard time coming to Europe anyway, Linda.
That's true. Such a tough time, but thankfully some relief in sight now. Frederick Pleitgen in Vienna, thank you very much for that update. Germany is, of course, the final destination for thousands of migrants and refugees right now. And as we've seen, its people in government have been very welcoming to those hoping for a new home. But Germany's Chancellor says other countries need to step up too. Natalie Allen reports.
Ask any refugee where they're going, and it's... When they were stuck at the Budapest train station, they appealed directly to German Chancellor Angela Merkel. They hold up pictures of her. Some call her Mama. Merkel is determined that Germany can and will help those who are legitimate refugees. Thousands of volunteers are stepping up and following her lead. They bring supplies, toys, and welcoming smiles to refugees. Germans even have a word for this phenomenon, Willkommenkultur, a culture of welcome. Merkel has been able to drown critics by insisting that people in need must get help. And she can afford to be so bold. Germany's economy is robust. Her government will pump millions into cities around Germany to help with the flood of refugees.
This is literally a nationwide task, and we can't leave communities fending for themselves.
And she promises to do it all without raising taxes. But Merkel knows the tides can shift if other European countries don't accept more refugees.
It's impossible that 4 or 5 countries carry all the burden.
Merkel is banking on European values, she says, and they include protection for those in need. Natalie Allen, CNN, Atlanta.
The spiralling violence and the refugee fallout in Syria are causing a funding shortfall at the World Food Programme. Food aid to more than 200,000 Syrian refugees in the Middle East was suspended this week. For the latest, let's bring in Ian Lee, who's joining us from Cairo. And Ian, these people have already fled dangerous and deadly war-torn areas. Now they're being told they won't get the food they've been getting. How dire will the situation become for these people in the coming days and weeks?
Oh, pretty bad, Linda. Right now, there's about 630,000 Syrian refugees in Jordan, and recently 229,000 of them received a text message from the World Food Programme saying that aid to them has been suspended indefinitely. That's a lot of people that are going to be going out without food, and it isn't a lot. It's about $14 a month to bring food to one of these people. The World Food Programme saying they need about over $200 million to keep this going through November. But without any of this food assistance, they really do not have many options. They're going back to Syria, or trying to flee to Europe, or going into one of the refugee camps that have been set up that have had their problems as well. So this really does create a dire situation for Syrian refugees in Jordan.
Jordan, of course, have taken in more refugees than most, but there is some criticism being leveled towards the Gulf nations, some of the richest countries in the region, like Saudi Arabia, who've virtually taken in none. What's the feeling towards those countries? Is there pressure for them to open up their doors to refugees or offer more funding?
You know, what's interesting is you do have that typical condemnation from Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International. These countries are no stranger to that sort of criticism. But what I'm seeing here in social media, on Twitter, Facebook, from the average people who live here in the Middle East, is strong condemnation against these countries for not taking in any Syrian refugees. Yes, they've given money to help these people during this time, hundreds of millions of dollars, but they haven't brought anyone actually into their country. And these are countries that also have very large military budgets. They've also have been in some ways meddling in Syria, supporting different factions, and there has been strong condemnation. You looked at recently that young boy who washed up on shore. There was a picture on Facebook going around of the Arab leaders just standing idly by, or the Gulf leaders rather, standing idly by as this migrant crisis unfolds. So yes, a lot of strong condemnation, and we really haven't seen much reaction since.
And Ian, you mentioned the $14 a month that these people were getting from the World Food Programme. Do they get any other subsidies from the government of Jordan or other aid organisations?
Well, you do get assistance from other places, and if you look at the breakdown, about 80% of the refugees don't live in refugee camps in Jordan. So that means they're living among the population, that they're able to find some place to live outside of the refugee camps. But a lot of these people really depended on that support from the World Food Programme just to make ends meet day by day, and a lot of them do live day by day, just barely getting by. There are other aid agencies, but really, when you look at the World Food Programme, it is the largest distributor of food in Jordan, and that really just shows like the crisis that is unfolding.
Yeah, that's right. They really need some donations desperately. Ian Lee in Cairo, thank you very much. And next hour on CNN Newsroom, I'll speak with a spokeswoman of the World Food Programme about the challenges they're facing in distributing aid and getting donations. Well, Russia is reportedly increasing its military presence in Syria, coming up the diplomatic warning voiced by US Secretary of State John Kerry to his Russian counterpart. Plus, new details on the State Department staffer who says he won't testify before the Congressional Committee investigating Hillary Clinton's emails.